The humid Okinawa air clung to my uniform as I stepped off the transport, sea bag slung over my shoulder, boots still heavy with the dust of 13 months overseas. I'd been counting down the days until I could walk through my own front door again, sleep in my own bed, breathe the familiar air of home. What I found instead was a betrayal so deep it would shake everything I thought I knew about family. My phone had been buzzing for the past hour during the layover in Seattle. Text after text from numbers I didn't recognize, missed calls from my father, voicemails I hadn't had time to check. Something felt wrong, but I told myself it was just the usual family drama. My older brother Marcus had probably gotten himself into another mess. Dad was probably stressed about money again. Nothing I hadn't handled before. The taxi pulled into my driveway just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard I'd worked so hard to maintain before deployment. But something was different. There were cars I didn't recognize parked outside. Lights were on in windows that should have been dark. And standing on my porch, wearing expressions I'd never seen before, were my father and Marcus, both holding beer bottles like they were celebrating something. I paid the driver, grabbed my gear, and walked toward the house that had been my sanctuary for 8 years. The house I'd bought with my own money, renovated with my own hands. The place that represented everything I'd worked for in the Marine Corps. My father stepped forward as I approached, his face carrying that particular mixture of guilt and defiance I remembered from my teenage years. "Welcome home, sweetheart," he said, but his voice carried none of the warmth those words should hold. "Dad," I nodded, setting my sea bag down. "What's going on? Why are there so many cars here?" Marcus laughed. Actually laughed, taking a long pull from his beer. "Oh man, this is going to be good. Tell her, Dad. Tell her what we did." My stomach dropped. The way he said it, the gleam in his eyes, the nervous energy radiating from both of them. This wasn't good news. This was something that would change everything. My father cleared his throat, straightening his shoulders the way he used to when he had to discipline me as a child. "Maria, we need to talk about the house." "What about it?" I asked, though every instinct I'd honed in the Corps was screaming that I didn't want to hear the answer. "We sold it," Marcus said, grinning like he'd just delivered the punchline to the world's greatest joke. 3 weeks ago, clean sale, cash buyers, everything went smooth as silk." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he'd just said. "You what?" "Now before you get upset," my father said quickly, raising his hands like he was trying to calm a spooked horse. "We had good reasons. Marcus was in serious trouble, real serious trouble, the kind that gets people hurt if they don't pay up fast." I stared at them both, my mind racing. "You sold my house, the one I've been paying for, maintaining, living in for 8 years. You weren't using it," Marcus shrugged. "You were overseas. We figured you'd understand once we explained the situation. Family helps family, right?" "How?" I asked quietly. "How did you sell my house?" My father pulled a folded document from his back pocket, waving it like a flag of surrender. "Power of attorney. You signed it before your last deployment, remember? In case something happened and we needed to handle your affairs." I remembered sitting in the JAG office, signing papers that were supposed to protect me if I was injured or killed overseas. Papers that were meant to help my family handle my funeral arrangements or medical decisions. Not papers that gave them the right to steal everything I'd worked for. "That was for emergencies," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "For if I was hurt or killed, not for you to sell my home to pay off his gambling debts." Marcus's face darkened. "Gambling debts? Is that what you think this was about?" "Wasn't it?" I shot back. He looked away, jaw clenched, and that told me everything I needed to know. My father stepped between us. "The details don't matter. What matters is that Marcus needed help, and we found a way to help him. You're strong, Maria. You're a Marine. You can bounce back from anything. But Marcus, he's not like you. He needed us to step up." "So you decided I didn't matter," I said. You decided that my service, my sacrifice, my 13 months overseas meant I didn't deserve to have a home to come back to. That's not what we decided, my father insisted. We decided that family comes first, and sometimes that means making hard choices. I looked at this man who had raised me, who had taught me about honor and loyalty and doing the right thing even when it was difficult. I tried to find some trace of that person in the stranger standing before me, but all I could see was someone who had convinced himself that betrayal was justified, if you called it love. "Where am I supposed to live?" I asked. Marcus shrugged again. "You'll figure it out. You always do. Besides, you make good money in the Corps. You can afford to rent somewhere until you find another place to buy." "With what down payment?" I asked. "You just stole my equity. You just took the only asset I had." "We didn't steal anything," my father said firmly. "We made a difficult decision to help your brother. The money went to a good cause." "What money?" I asked. "How much did you sell it for?" They exchanged glances, and I saw something flicker across both their faces. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "That's not important right now," my father said. "What's important is that Marcus is safe, and you're home, and we can all move forward as a family." "Move forward?" I repeated. "You sold my house without telling me. You used legal documents I signed in good faith to commit what I'm pretty sure is fraud. And you want to move forward?" "It's not fraud," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad had the authority to make financial decisions. We checked with a lawyer." "What lawyer?" I demanded. "Benson," my father said quickly. "You remember Benson. He helped us with the paperwork." I did remember Benson. A man who operated in the gray areas of real estate law, who had a reputation for cutting corners and bending rules. The kind of man you called when you needed something done quickly and didn't care too much about whether it was entirely legal. "Benson's not a lawyer," I said. "He's a real estate broker with a history of shady deals." "He knows the law," my father insisted. "He knows how to exploit loopholes," I corrected. "There's a difference." I looked around at the cars parked in my driveway, at the lights glowing in windows of the house I'd called home for nearly a decade. "Who lives here now?" "The Hendersons," Marcus said. "Nice family, they've got kids. They're probably better for the neighborhood than a single woman who's never around anyway." The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. I stared at my brother, this man who shared my blood, my childhood, my history, and I realized I didn't know him at all. Or maybe I'd always known exactly who he was, and I'd just been fooling myself into thinking he might change. "I need to see the paperwork," I said. "All of it. The sale documents, the closing papers, everything." "Why?" my father asked. "What's done is done. Looking at paperwork isn't going to change anything." "Because I want to understand exactly what you did," I said, "and exactly what laws you might have broken in the process." Marcus stepped forward, his casual demeanor slipping for the first time since I'd arrived. "Laws? What laws? We didn't break any laws. We had permission to act on your behalf." "Power of attorney has limits," I said. "Specific limits. And selling someone's primary residence while they're on active duty overseas without their explicit consent might very well exceed those limits." My father's face went pale. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" I asked. "You wouldn't involve the authorities in a family matter." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had taught me about integrity and honor, who had stood proud at my graduation from boot camp, who had hugged me tight before every deployment and told me how much he loved me. I tried to reconcile that person with the one standing before me now, the one who had stolen my home and was asking me to stay quiet about it to protect the thieves. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet," I said honestly. "But I'm going to find out exactly what happened here. Every detail, every signature, every dollar." "Maria," my father said softly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be. We're family." "No," I said, picking up my sea bag and slinging it over my shoulder. "Family doesn't do this to each other. I don't know what we are anymore, but we're not that." I turned and walked back toward the taxi, which was still idling at the curb. The driver had been watching the whole exchange with the uncomfortable expression of someone who had accidentally witnessed a family falling apart. "Where to?" he asked as I climbed into the back seat. "Hotel," I said. "Any hotel." As we pulled away from the house, I caught a glimpse of my father and Marcus in the rearview mirror. They were standing exactly where I'd left them, frozen like statues in the growing darkness. Neither of them was laughing anymore. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the house they'd sold wasn't exactly what they thought it was. They thought it was. The hotel room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my utilities, staring at my phone as it buzzed with messages I wasn't ready to read. The weight of the day pressed down on my shoulders like a full combat load. But this was different. This was the kind of weight that came from betrayal, not duty. I finally opened my laptop and began typing. Not angry emails or desperate pleas, but methodical searches. Property records, legal databases, military assistance resources. If there's one thing the Corps teaches you, it's that knowledge is power. And I was about to educate myself on exactly what my father and Marcus had walked themselves into. The first thing I discovered made my blood run cold. The house they'd sold wasn't just any property, it was a VA-backed loan property, which came with specific federal protections for active duty service members, protections they'd completely ignored. The Service Members Civil Relief Act was clear as daylight. You couldn't just sell a service member's primary residence while they were on active duty without jumping through a series of legal hoops that required court approval, proper notification, and in some cases, a judge's direct order. None of which had happened. I pulled up the county recorder's website and searched for my address. There it was, the sale record, dated 3 weeks ago. But as I scrolled through the details, something didn't add up. The sale price was listed as $200,000. I'd had the house appraised before deployment, and it was worth at least $350,000, maybe more in the current market. They'd sold my house for 60% of its value. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized, but hoped I'd never need to use. The duty officer at Camp Pendleton's legal assistance office picked up on the second ring. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, legal assistance." "Rodriguez, this is Staff Sergeant Martinez, just returned from Okinawa. I need emergency legal consultation regarding potential fraud involving my civilian property." "Roger that, Martinez. How soon can you get here?" "I'm in Washington State. My property's here." "Understood. Let me patch you through to our civilian liaison. This sounds like it might involve federal violations." 20 minutes later, I was on a conference call with 2 JAG officers and a civilian attorney who specialized in military legal issues. I laid out the facts methodically, like I was briefing a mission. The dates, the documents, the power of attorney, the sale price, everything. The silence on the other end of the line when I finished was deafening. "Martinez," the civilian attorney finally said, "this isn't just fraud. This is potentially criminal fraud involving a protected class of victim. Your father and brother may have committed multiple felonies." "What are my options?" I asked. "Several. You can file a complaint with local law enforcement. You can petition federal court to void the sale. You can pursue civil action for damages. Or you can do all 3 simultaneously." "What about the people who bought the house?" "The Hendersons. They're victims too, assuming they didn't know about the fraudulent nature of the sale. But the transaction itself is invalid. They'll have to pursue their own legal remedies against your father, your brother, and this Benson character." I thanked them and hung up, then sat in the growing darkness of the hotel room, processing everything I'd learned. My father and Marcus hadn't just betrayed me, they'd destroyed multiple lives in the process. The Hendersons would lose their home. Their kids would have to move. All because 2 grown men couldn't figure out how to handle one gambling debt without stealing from a deployed Marine. But there was something else, something that had been nagging at me since I'd seen that sale price. $200,000 for a house worth $350,000. Where had the other $150,000 gone? I called the county assessor's office first thing the next morning. The woman who answered was helpful but confused by my questions. You're asking about a house that was sold by your father using power of attorney? That's correct. And you're the actual owner? I am. Ma'am, I'm looking at the records here, and there's something very strange about this sale. The property was listed as having significant structural damage and code violations. That's why the price was so low. My heart stopped. What kind of structural damage? Foundation issues, electrical problems, potential mold contamination. The inspection report is extensive. Can you email me that report? Of course. But ma'am, if you're the actual owner, you should know that these problems don't exist. I drive past that house every day on my way to work. It's in perfect condition. The pieces started falling into place like dominoes. They hadn't just sold my house. They'd manufactured fake problems to justify selling it below market value, which meant they'd pocketed the difference, probably splitting it with Benson and whoever else was involved in this scheme. The inspection report arrived in my inbox an hour later, and it was a masterpiece of fiction. Foundation cracks that didn't exist, electrical hazards that had never been there, mold damage in a house I'd renovated myself just 2 years earlier. Every single problem was fabricated, documented with photos that had clearly been taken at different properties entirely. I printed everything and drove back to my neighborhood. The Hendersons' car was in the driveway, and I could see children's toys scattered across the front yard. A swing set had been installed in the back. They were trying to make it home, and they had no idea they were living in the middle of a crime scene. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. A woman in her 30s answered, holding a coffee mug and wearing the kind of tired smile that comes from unpacking boxes for weeks. Can I help you? Mrs. Henderson, my name is Maria Martinez. I need to talk to you about this house. Her smile faded. Are you from the Homeowners Association? Because we're still getting settled, and if there are issues with the yard... No, ma'am. I'm the person who actually owns this house. She stared at me for a long moment, then stepped back. I think you're confused. We bought this house fair and square. We have all the paperwork. I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you paid for it in good faith, but the people who sold it to you didn't have the right to sell it. That's impossible. The title was clear. We had it inspected. I held up the fabricated inspection report. Was this your inspection? She took it, her hands shaking slightly as she read. This says there's foundation damage, but we had our own inspection done. There's nothing wrong with the foundation. Because there never was. This report is fake. The whole sale was fraudulent. Mrs. Henderson sank into a chair on the porch, the report falling from her hands. We put everything into this house. Our entire savings, our children's college funds. We sold our old house to buy this one. I know, and I'm sorry. You're victims in this too. What happens now? She whispered. Now, we both fight to make this right. But I want you to know I'm not going to leave you homeless. We'll figure out a way to protect your family while we sort this mess out. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Why would your father do this? I sat down on the step beside her. Because he cares more about enabling my brother than he does about doing what's right, and because he thought I was too far away to stop him. But you're here now. I'm here now. Over the next hour, I explained everything to Mrs. Henderson. The power of attorney abuse, the fabricated inspection, the below-market sale price, all of it. She listened with the growing horror of someone realizing they'd been played by professionals. What do we do? She asked finally. We call the police. We call the FBI. We call everyone who needs to know that a federal crime has been committed. Will we lose the house? The sale will probably be voided. But I promise you this, Mrs. Henderson. Your family won't suffer because of what my family did. I'll make sure of that. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Your father seemed like such a nice man when we met him. So did your brother. They can be charming when they want something. And this Benson person? He's been running scams like this for years. You're not his first victims. As we sat there on the porch of my stolen house, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just anger, not just betrayal, but a strange kind of clarity. For the first time in my adult life, I could see my family exactly as they were. Not as I wanted them to be, not as they pretended to be, but as they actually were. My father wasn't the honorable man I'd believed him to be. He was a weak man who enabled his son's destructive behavior at everyone else's expense. Marcus wasn't the troubled but lovable brother I'd been making excuses for since childhood. He was a predator who took from everyone around him without conscience or remorse. And me? I wasn't the dutiful daughter who owed them endless forgiveness and financial support. I was a United States Marine who'd been the victim of a federal crime, and I was going to respond accordingly. The police arrived within an hour of my call. 2 detectives, both veterans themselves, who listened to my story with the grim expressions of people who'd seen this kind of family betrayal before. "How much money are we talking about?" Detective Morrison asked. "At least $150,000 in fraudulent depreciation. Probably more when you factor in the fees and kickbacks." "And you have documentation?" "Everything. The fake inspection, the real appraisals, the sale records, the power of attorney documents, all of it." Detective Phillips nodded. "This is going to be a complex case. Multiple jurisdictions, federal violations, several victims. But you've done good work documenting everything." "I learned from the best," I said. "We'll need to interview your father and brother. Are they likely to cooperate?" I thought about the men I'd left standing in my driveway the night before, about their casual arrogance and their complete lack of remorse. "No," I said. "They're going to lawyer up and claim they were trying to help me. That's fine. We've handled cases like this before. The evidence speaks for itself." As the detectives drove away, I stood in the yard of the house I'd bought with my own money, renovated with my own hands, and lost to my own family's greed. But for the first time since I'd stepped off that transport in Okinawa, I didn't feel helpless. I felt like a Marine with a mission. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, Detective Morrison called with news that made my chest tighten with a mixture of vindication and dread. "Martinez, we executed search warrants this morning. Your father's house, your brother's apartment, and Benson's office. What we found is bigger than we initially thought." I gripped the phone tighter. "How much bigger?" "Your house wasn't the first. Benson's been running this scheme for at least 3 years. We found files on 12 other properties, all involving deployed service members, all using fabricated inspection reports." The weight of that revelation settled over me like smoke from a distant fire. 12 other families, 12 other Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen who'd come home to find their lives stolen while they served overseas. My case wasn't personal anymore. It was part of something systematic, predatory, designed to exploit the very people who sacrificed the most. "What about my father and Marcus?" "That's where it gets complicated. We arrested Benson this morning. He's looking at federal charges, multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, the works. But your father and brother, they're claiming they were victims too." "Victims?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "They're saying Benson approached your father, told him you were in financial trouble overseas, convinced him the house needed to be sold quickly to pay off your debts. They claim they believed they were helping you." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar burn of family lies dressed up as concern. Even caught red-handed, even facing federal charges, they were still spinning stories, still playing the victim card they'd perfected over decades of enabling each other's worst impulses. "Detective, I never had any debts. My credit score is 820. I've never missed a payment on anything in my adult life. We know we pulled your financial records. You're cleaner than a whistle, but they're sticking to their story and their attorney is good." "What attorney?" "Someone expensive, someone who specializes in federal defense work. The kind of lawyer that costs more than most people make in a year." That stopped me cold. Where did they get money for an expensive lawyer? "That's what we're trying to figure out. Your father claims he's borrowing against his own property, but the numbers don't add up. We think there might be more money floating around than we initially realized." I thanked Detective Morrison and hung up, then sat in the hotel room staring at the wall. Every answer led to 3 new questions. Every revelation peeled back another layer of deception. This wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about a family I thought I knew, revealing themselves to be strangers wearing familiar faces. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Maria, this is your cousin Sarah. I heard about what happened. Can we talk?" Sarah. My father's sister's daughter. Someone I'd barely spoken to since childhood family reunions. I hadn't even known she had my number. I called her back immediately. "Maria? Oh, thank God. I've been trying to figure out how to reach you ever since I heard." "How did you hear?" "Your father called my mom yesterday, asking if she could loan him money for legal fees. When she asked why he needed a lawyer, the whole story came out." I felt a chill run down my spine. What exactly did he tell her? "He said you were trying to destroy the family over a misunderstanding, that you were being vindictive because you couldn't handle Marcus getting help when he needed it. But Maria, there's something else. Something he didn't tell you." "What?" "Marcus owes money to some very dangerous people, not just gambling debts, drug debts, the kind where people get hurt if they don't pay." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about helping family. This was about survival. Marcus had gotten himself into trouble with people who collected debts with violence, and my father had panicked. But instead of getting Marcus help, instead of calling the police or finding legitimate solutions, they'd decided to sacrifice me to save themselves. "How much does he owe?" I asked. "At least 200,000. Maybe more." "Maria, these aren't bookies or casino managers. These are people who break legs first and ask questions later. 200,000. Exactly what they'd gotten for my house, even after the fraudulent depreciation. Every dollar of my stolen equity had gone to buy Marcus's safety at the cost of my security." "Sarah, why are you telling me this?" "Because it's wrong. Because you've served our country for over a decade while Marcus has done nothing but take from everyone around him. And because I think you need to know what you're really fighting." "What do you mean?" "I mean your father isn't going to back down. He can't. If this case falls apart, if Marcus doesn't stay protected, those people are going to come for him. Your dad would rather see you destroyed than see Marcus hurt." The brutal honesty of it hit me like a physical blow. My father had made his choice. Not between right and wrong, not between his children, but between the son he thought he could save, and the daughter he believed was strong enough to survive being sacrificed. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "The lawyer they hired? He's not just expensive. He's connected. The kind of connected that makes evidence disappear and witnesses change their stories." "Are you saying they're going to try to frame me?" "I'm saying they're going to do whatever it takes to make this go away. And Maria, I'm scared for you." After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in the growing darkness of the hotel room, processing the magnitude of what I was facing. This wasn't just about recovering my stolen property. This was about fighting a coordinated effort to destroy my life, orchestrated by people who shared my blood and funded by my own money. But they'd forgotten something important. They'd forgotten who they were fighting. I wasn't some helpless victim they could manipulate with guilt and family obligation. I was a United States Marine, trained in combat strategy and survival. I'd faced down enemy fire in 2 combat zones. I'd led Marines through situations where failure meant death. And now they wanted to threaten me with lawyers and intimidation? They had no idea what they'd started. I opened my laptop and began making calls. Not to family members or local police, but to resources they couldn't corrupt or intimidate. The Inspector General's office, the FBI's white-collar crime division, military legal assistance networks that specialized in protecting service members from exactly this kind of exploitation. By morning, I had meetings scheduled with federal agents, victim advocates, and a military attorney who'd built her career prosecuting fraud against service members. I had documentation requests filed with 3 different agencies and a paper trail that would make any attempt to frame me backfire spectacularly. But most importantly, I had something my father and Marcus had never possessed: the moral authority that comes from being right, and the institutional support that comes from serving something bigger than yourself. The next afternoon, I was sitting across from FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh in a sterile conference room that smelled like coffee and justice delayed. She'd been investigating Benson for 2 years, building a case that would shut down his operation permanently. "Your situation broke it wide open," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Benson kept meticulous records, probably for blackmail purposes. We have everything: bank transfers, forged documents, recorded phone conversations. Your father and brother are in this up to their necks." "What about the other victims?" "We're contacting all of them. Most don't even know they were defrauded yet. Benson was careful to target service members who were deployed for extended periods, people who wouldn't discover the theft until they came home." I opened the folder and began reading. Transaction records showing money flowing from my house sale to accounts controlled by Marcus. Phone logs showing dozens of calls between my father and Benson in the weeks before the sale. Most damning of all, recorded conversations where they discussed fabricating the inspection report to justify the low sale price. "They're going to claim they were manipulated by Benson," I said. "They can claim whatever they want. We have them on tape discussing how to hide the fraud from you. That's not the behavior of innocent victims." Agent Walsh leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "Martinez, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Are you prepared for what comes next?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, this is going to destroy your family. Your father will likely face federal prison time. Your brother, too. This will be in the newspapers. Everyone in your hometown will know what happened. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the question for a long moment. Was I prepared to watch my father led away in handcuffs? Was I ready to see my brother's mugshot on the evening news? Could I live with being the person who brought federal law enforcement down on my own blood relatives? Then I thought about the other victims. The 12 service members who'd come home to find their lives stolen. The families who'd been destroyed while they served overseas. The Hendersons who'd poured their life savings into a house they'd lose because of my family's crimes. "Agent Walsh," I said finally, "I took an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I didn't realize that would include my own family, but an oath is an oath." She smiled grimly. "That's what I hoped you'd say." The arrests happened on a Thursday morning while I was meeting with the VA legal office about restoring my property rights. Detective Morrison called as I was reviewing paperwork that would void the fraudulent sale and return the house to my name. "It's done," he said simply. "We picked up your father at his house, your brother at a gas station. Both in custody, both charged with federal fraud, conspiracy, and violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that justice was finally moving forward, sadness that it had come to this. "How did they react?" "Your father was quiet, didn't say much beyond asking for his lawyer. Your brother, on the other hand, seemed genuinely shocked that we were arresting him. Kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, that he was trying to help you." Even in custody, even facing federal charges, Marcus was still playing the victim. Still convinced that his needs justified everyone else's suffering. Some people never learn, never change, never accept responsibility for the destruction they cause. What happens now? Now they get arraigned, probably make bail, and we build the case for trial. With Benson cooperating and all the evidence we've gathered, this should be straightforward. But Martinez, you need to be prepared for them to come after you. What do you mean? I mean, they're going to try to make you the villain in this story. They're going to claim you're vindictive, that you're destroying the family over money, that you should have just accepted what happened and moved on. Their attorney is already floating that narrative to the media. The media? I hadn't thought about that. My private family nightmare was about to become public entertainment, dissected by strangers who'd never worn a uniform or served overseas or sacrificed anything for anyone. But I'd survived worse things than gossip and judgment. I'd survived combat, betrayal, and the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about family. I could survive whatever came next. That evening, I drove back to my neighborhood one more time. The Hendersons' car was in the driveway, and I could see warm light, glowing through windows that had once framed my own life. I knocked on the door, and Mrs. Henderson answered with a cautious smile. "Any news?" she asked. "The arrests were made this morning. The sale will be officially voided within the week." Her face crumpled with relief and fear. "What does that mean for us?" I'd been thinking about that question for days, weighing options and possibilities. The legal answer was simple. They'd have to leave, pursue their losses through civil court, and hope to recover some portion of their investment from people who'd probably spent most of the money already. But legal answers aren't always the right answers. "Mrs. Henderson, how would you feel about becoming my tenants instead of my buyers?" She blinked. "What?" "I'm going to be stationed somewhere else within the year. I need someone reliable to take care of the house, someone who'll treat it like home. Your family seems perfect for that. We can't afford market rent. Not after losing our down payment. Then we'll work out something you can afford. Something that lets you stay, lets your kids keep their schools and their friends, and gives you time to rebuild your finances." She stared at me for a long moment, tears forming in her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because what my family did to you was wrong, and because sometimes the only way to heal from betrayal is to choose kindness instead of revenge." We talked for another hour, working out details and possibilities. Not a legal contract, not yet, but an understanding between two families trying to make something good out of something terrible. As I walked back to my rental car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not because the legal battles were over, they were just beginning. Not because my family relationships were healed. They might never be. But because I'd remembered something important about who I was and what I stood for. I was a Marine who'd sworn to protect the innocent and defend what was right. That didn't stop being true just because the enemies were related to me. The trial lasted 3 months. Every morning I sat in the gallery watching my father and Marcus at the defendant's table, their expensive attorney whispering strategies that couldn't change the mountain of evidence against them. The jury heard recorded phone calls, saw fabricated documents, listened to Benson describe in detail how they'd orchestrated the theft of not just my house, but the homes of 12 other deployed service members. When the verdicts came down, my father received 4 years in federal prison. Marcus got 6, thanks to his prior record and the drug connections that had started this whole nightmare. Benson received 12 years and restitution orders that would follow him for the rest of his life. I felt no joy watching them led away in shackles. No satisfaction in their downfall, just the quiet relief that comes when justice finally catches up to people who thought they were above consequences. The house is mine again, legally and completely. The Hendersons stayed on as tenants, and their children's laughter echoes through rooms that once held only silence and betrayal. Sometimes healing sounds like swing sets in the backyard and homework sessions at the kitchen table. My father writes letters from prison now. Short, awkward attempts at apology that always somehow circle back to justification. I read them, file them away, and continue building a life that doesn't require his approval or understanding. If you've ever been betrayed by people you trusted, remember this: your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. Your strength isn't measured by what you're willing to accept. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their choices, even when those people share your name. Family isn't just about blood, it's about honor, loyalty, and choosing to protect each other instead of preying on each other. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you were born into.